Hey guys, here is my Yamaha Super Tenere. It is absolutely cold in DC, and yesterday I took it for a ride. In the morning, it was nice. I went riding with a friend of mine, I picked her up, and then I headed to north, went up to 1,600 feet, and it started freezing, so I come back down. Now in DC, we're about to get like a storm Wednesday. We're supposed to get some snow. But this bike, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the Super Tenere. You know, I've done quite a few videos about it, but I've owned it for quite some time now. As you guys recall, I actually traded my pickup truck for this. And I drove my pickup truck all the way to Rochester, New York. And I came back down on it. And you can watch the video on the channel. But this bike just never missed a beat. This thing has got 54,000 miles at this point, and the bike feels like it's brand new. It's just so solid. When you think about adventure bikes though, I like to think more of adventure bikes as sport touring bikes that are much more usable for everyday riders, and that's what I like about this Super Tenere. It's heavy, yeah, it's 580 pounds. But also, when you think about it, the weight doesn't really feel like it's 580 pounds. There are some pros and cons of this bike, and I'll talk to you guys about it. But carrying a passenger on this is easy. The bike barely seems like it has any load on the bike at all times, because this bike feels more like a tractor than a motorcycle. The engine is just so torquey. And you know, the KTM 1190 makes about 30 horsepower more than this bike, but it makes less torque than this bike. And it's kind of strange because you would assume, oh yeah, it's going to have more torque, but the way this bike makes power, I think is almost like comparable to a V-twin. And V-twins are very good for street riding. They don't make the most horsepower, but their type of power that they make and the torque is exactly what most people want. But on paper, it never sounds good. The Super Tenere was never given very good reviews by motorcyclists online, journalists. And I think they kind of gloss it over. In a way, that's a benefit to me because I bought this or traded it, you know, and you can get these 2012s, 2013s very cheaply. And even if you get a Super Tenere with 100,000 miles, it is still a very good bike. You know, a lot of people think that you put 30,000 miles on a bike and it's going to be useless. But Super Tenere, because the engine is so big, if it's very low revving, it tends to seem like it's a brand new bike most of the time. It has no issues at all. There's nothing about this bike that seems to be budget. When you compare it to the GS, brand new, a Super Tenere, I believe, is like $17,000, $18,000. The GS is $27,000 with bags and all of that. It's just kind of incredible. It blows my mind that people are actually willing to pay for a bike like the GS, even though it doesn't give you that much more. And I guess it gives you more as in like bells and whistles. And you know, the reason I like my Honda Ascot is that it doesn't have any of those bells and whistles. Sometimes having so many bells and whistles detracts from the motorcycling experience, at least for me. But the Super Tenere, it just gives you enough. Even then, I think that having ABS and traction control is not something I really like in bikes, and I would rather not have it. I would rather have Yamaha give me a very reliable, solid bike with nothing. I kind of like that idea, but because everybody's putting like electronic stuff in their bikes, Yamaha did that as well. So this bike makes about 110 horsepower. And I believe the torque is actually about 100 something as well, like 110, whatever. But it feels really solid. It never feels like you're missing any power. Comparing to sport touring bikes like the ST 1300 and FJR 1300, it doesn't feel as powerful, because the way that makes power is more down low, where most riders tend to use it. And even then, like, it's way too much power. The good thing about this bike is that you have two modes, touring and sport. And touring should be called something else because it's not really touring. It should be more like a commuting sort of button or eco mode. But the touring, it makes riding easier at very low speeds if you're doing bumper-to-bumper traffic, riding in the city, riding with a passenger that doesn't like to be scared, because this throttle is kind of snatchy. And that might be bad for some riders, but I actually like a snatchy throttle. It makes it much more fun. It's got traction control. The traction control is annoying because it's got 3 options: mode 1, mode 2, and no. And I would rather just like select no all the way and just leave it, because when you turn off the bike, it just goes back to mode 1. Mode 1 is probably the safest one for most riders, but I don't like that. It's also got ABS. ABS is flawless on it. Another downside is that you cannot turn off ABS. There is a way to bypass the ABS using the fuses, but it also turns off your speedometer, and I don't like that. That's something that Yamaha should have known. And it's not like most riders are going to be turning off ABS, but a lot of the adventure market is about selling the sizzle instead of the steak. So when you have that, a lot of riders that like to pretend they're going to go on adventures, they'll see that and go like, oh, I can't go on some gravel roads or fire roads. But this bike is completely capable for fire road riding. Like, there's no issues with it at all. When it comes to engine, inline 2 makes plenty of power. It's kind of massive. It's a massive bike. And the cool thing about this bike is that it sounds good. It's very much like that story, Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll, or Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, whatever. The reason is because if you ride it slowly, you barely hear the engine. But if you crank it, it feels like a V-twin. It feels like a monster of a bike. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that like when they're reviewing this bike, because it does sound really good when you're revving it up. You can watch all my videos and see that if I'm coming off a corner, the air induction going into the air box makes it sound like it's this amazing V-twin. And I really like that. It's a really kind of an amazing sound. It's the first inline 2 that sounds great. Now you can watch my old videos with my inline 2 NC700 and see what a bad sounding bike sounds like. The NC700 is brilliant, but it sounds like crap. A Africa Twin doesn't sound great, but this damn thing sounds great. I don't know why, but it sounds really amazing. Now, the Yamaha Tenere 700 is probably going to eclipse this one. And what that means when it comes out and it starts being flooded into these markets, because a lot of people are actually selling these for the Tenere 700, is that you're going to be able to get amazing deals everywhere on these bikes. Because even though the 700 might be better for riders who might want to go off-road, 700cc is still a really big bike. And if you're new to riding, you're not going to improve your skills getting a 700cc heavy bike like the Tenere 700 and be able to handle it off-road. That's something that I think a lot of guys think, oh yeah, just because they reduced the size, somehow my skills are going to be increased. You really should get like a 250 dirt bike. One of the best dual sports that you can get for real off-road riding right now is a CRF 250L. And they make the CRF 250L Rally, which has got more plastic and luggage support and all of these things, LED light. But it's hard to tell people that are interested in buying a large adventure bike to get a CRF 250L so they can learn. You're not going to be a good rider riding this thing off-road. Like, the first day you drop this, you're going to go, oh, I made a huge mistake bringing this here. This is the type of bike, if you get stuck out on a trail, you might have to get like winches to pull you out. On a dirt bike, you can just kind of like figure it out. You know, it's not that much weight. But surprisingly, the CRF 250L Dual Sport is the same weight as my Big Red Pig, my XR650R. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like it should be lighter, but it's the same weight, which is pretty darn heavy. That's a good bike to start out with. Don't get a GS. Don't get a BMW GS, hoping that you're going to be a great off-road rider. The guys that you see doing these off-road rides, they're on photos doing wheelies. They're not you, and most likely that's not going to be you. And if it is, you're probably going to crash. Those are professional riders that have been riding since they were fetuses. That's very unlike most riders. One thing I learned when I was riding dirt is that if you don't start very early on, like you're talking about teenage years, you're not going to be a good rider. Like dirt riding requires a whole lot more than riding on the street. On the street, it's kind of like a no-brainer. You can take a GSX-R 1000, you can ride it on the street, but riding a very powerful dirt bike on dirt and on trails is much harder, and a lot of people do get hurt. So I would recommend steering away from the large dual sports. This thing is mostly at home on gravel roads, which is the reason I like it. I like that I can ride this thing to California and then hit some trails. Like, I don't feel like I need to do too much off-roading because I kind of know the limits. I know my limits. But there are guys that ride these things off-road. But those are people that like pain. I don't think I want that. I've dropped quite a few bikes off-road, and I know what it's like to pick up a heavy bike. But this thing is perfect for riding to California from DC and riding some really nice forest roads, some gravel roads, taking it off the beaten path. But when it comes to like taking this thing on a desert ride, yeah, I think I'll probably skip that. The bike is amazing. You can get these for $5,000 to $6,000. They're everywhere apparently these days, and you can get good deals in the winter on the East Coast. Generally, they're very well taken care of because the people that do buy these things, they love them. They love the Super Tenere because it is kind of like a donkey. No matter what you need, this bike always starts up, it always rides, it never has issues. And that's the beauty of the Super Tenere. And it's the beauty why there's such a demand for these type of bikes. The suspension is more than enough to deal with pothole-infested cities. It's got enough power to do some throttle wheelies. It's just like a phenomenal bike. And I think if people were to get this over the GS, I think they would enjoy it more, but I think it doesn't give you enough cred on the street. You know, when you hear like some guy getting a BMW GS, you go like, oh man, that guy's got money. But on this, it's kind of like the type of person that would get a V-Strom 650 would possibly get this as well because it's almost in the same price range. It just, it feels like it's a better bike over time than the GS. This definitely will give you less problems than the GS. If you're concerned about spending money or wasting money, this thing will not give any issues. It's not going to require you to take it to the shop to reset any like brake systems. It's just a very simple bike that's got more than enough technology that's not going to be braking on the road while you're going for a very long time. I just want to do a brief overview. I am probably going to dark side this thing. If you don't know what dark siding is, it's putting a car tire. It's frowned upon by motorcyclists that have never tried it. I don't really care. So, look at the foot pegs. That's something usually you have to pay extra for, the rubber and like the serrated sort of stuff. And I like that the foot peg and everything is like pushed in because most people are going to be dropping these bikes. Something I always do is this. I put my feet really close to that. Very bulky swing arm. Look at that. It's got a center stand. The sight glass is like down there. I don't know what the hell Yamaha was thinking. I wish they made it a little bit more accessible, but at least it's not going to be breaking. If you ever need to replace that sight glass, it's going to be a pain. It's got crash bars. It's got this panel here, and it's kind of cool because these screws is something that Yamaha has been doing for a while. It's like a half turn and it pops it out. It's got 4. And even with the crash bars, I can remove it, slide it back, and access the battery and the fuses. Up front, you have a 19-inch front wheel. You have 17-inch in the rear. You have upside-down forks. They look awesome. The suspension on this is quite amazing. It's probably one of the better suspended bikes. The new ones, they do make electronic suspension, and that's all good and stuff, but I don't need it. And if I can even save $500, I would not get it. I think it's just things that are bound to fail. I like the simple stuff. And you can adjust the shock on the go. The brakes, rear brakes are the easiest to change ever. These bolts, undo it, lift it up. No need to remove anything else, just incredible. I got my hand guards. I got a little cruise control thingy that I don't use. The blinkers, I like the blinkers that they're using. They kind of look like little floppy ears. I like the front too, you know. This bike came out first and then the Africa Twin came out afterwards, and I think they kind of copied a little bit of the Yamaha. But Yamaha makes really good stuff. I got a touring windscreen, and it's nice that Yamaha put a cigarette lighter 12-volt socket right up here. Let's see what else. The seat is adjustable. It's got a high and low position. You don't need any more. But sorry, BMW guys, yeah, no heated butt pads here. It's just a very simple bike. Don't need it. Around the side, this headlight resembles a Yamaha R6 from 2000s. The stock exhaust, the hole is actually kind of coming down, so it's kind of cool. And look at that shaft drive that doesn't break, BMW guys. And very large, bulky motor. Of course, you do have this side. This side, it's not recommended you put things hanging off this crash bars. A lot of Tenere guys and adventure guys like to put luggage here, but that's where your radiator and fan is, so keep it clear. Right underneath the gas tank, you have your air box as well. And of course, clutch. On this left side, you have your horn, signals, light. Mirrors are really good. You have an hydraulic clutch. The handlebars on this are so wide. These are the widest handlebars I've ever had. But it does make moving around the garage and everything much easier. Now here's the downside. Gas tank, small gas tank, 6 gallons. And the real bad side is that the fuel consumption, as I computed it, just riding normally, I'm getting 41 miles to the gallon. I'm sure people will get better gas mileage, but I'm getting 41 commuting. Not good. The range is about 220, and the reason a lot of people complain about this is that combined 40 miles to the gallon with a fuel gauge that's notoriously bad, it's so inaccurate that you think that you're running out of gas, but you have like 70 miles left on reserve. I just don't understand how Yamaha could have possibly made that big of a mistake. I think that's just really ridiculous. But the way to go about it is that you have to remove the gas tank, remove the pump, and then there's a sensor inside, and then you bend the wire. I don't know. If my pump ever breaks, I think I'll do that. Look at that, I got a little dent here. What the hell? I think that girl hit it. Anyways, this bike, the signals are very industrial. Let me turn them on. Look at that little animation thing. It's very cool. You can see my fuel gauge is blinking. And I'm at 190 miles. That's kind of crazy. So 54.5 K. Not bad. So let's start this thing. The battery's a little bit low. It's actually not low, but it feels low. People tell me that's normal. So I think it sounds really good. It sounds mean. Let's look at the headlights here. Yeah, look at that. Headlights are almost worthless. I mean, I like headlights. That's my high beams. I think I need to replace these with LEDs because this bike is just, the headlights are just so terrible. They're so terrible. The headlights are just so bad. You cannot see anything at night. I need to get something. Luckily, I tried to avoid riding at night, but yeah, that's the Super Tenere. So the real cons are the fuel mileage, but the fuel mileage is actually comparable to the large ADV bikes, 41 to 45 miles to the gallon. And it's just something that really annoys me. The tank range, though, could be an issue because 220, 230 miles per tank, and your reserve kind of lights up at 170, but if you're new to the Tenere, then you would actually think that you really have like 1 gallon left, but you have 2 gallons left when the reserve light comes on. I wish Yamaha would fix that. The bike is great, just those 2 issues. But otherwise, you can ride this bike for probably the remainder of your life. It's probably going to outlive you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. That's the Yamaha Super Tenere, and I will see you in the next video. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.